Game over, man. Game over.
Johnny. You're gonna need a big approach.
So serious.
I am Arnett.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Hey, is this thing on? Check. Is this thing on?
I can hear you.
Myself.
I can hear
Okay.
you. Yeah, I
Just
think we're
wanna make
good.
Sure. Hey,
Yeah.
welcome
Yeah.
everybody to this podcast review.
He threw me for a loop there. That was not our usual intro, JD.
I know. I decided to throw everybody off there, but welcome everybody. We are here to talk about this film. It is December 14th, 2025. I am JD Duran.
I am Brendan Cassidy.
Yeah, I am excited to talk about Bradley Cooper's latest film for a couple of reasons. Anytime Bradley Cooper gets behind the camera, I am interested. I'm eager. I'm curious, given his past directorial efforts. It's also interesting because this is quite the departure from what we've seen with Cooper behind the camera to this point. I'm sure we'll have a lot of thoughts on that.
Sort of. Yeah, we'll have thoughts about that for sure.
For sure. And a fascinating little cast here as well. I'm very eager to talk about these performances. Quite
Yeah,
eager.
I'm very eager to talk about pretty much everything around this film. And I think what's interesting, and you and I were talking about this offline, JD, pretty much every time Bradley Cooper enters the film narrative in some way, especially if it's a film that he is directing, whether it be A Star Is Born or Maestro from a few years ago, he is all over the award circuit because this is a man that is absolutely chasing an Oscar. I feel like that is part of his MO.
I'm totally
as
okay
of
with
late.
it.
I'm fine with that too. He's a talented individual, fellow Philly boy, so it's really cool to say there too. But this is yet another one of his directorial efforts, a Bradley Cooper film, and yet I feel like no one is talking about it.
Yeah, it is strange. It is really quite strange in that regard. And I do think there are Oscar caliber components to this film that we can certainly get into. I do find it interesting that this is the one film that he's done so far that has been left behind.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just because of the context of this year and what it's up against. Would this film play differently in other years? I don't know. But I do think that is a bit ironic.
I have thoughts about that as well, and we sort of talked about that offline as well. I think there's a lot of reasons as to why this one hasn't been pushed as hard by Searchlight, and I think a lot of it has to do with how easily marketable Bradley Cooper's past two films were as far as how they could compete as awards contenders. Like there was a flashiness to those films that this one doesn't really have. By comparison, at the very least. So the narrative around how to push that is definitely a little bit harder, to say the least. And given the year that it is right now, I think it could easily have gotten lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, it's somewhat like, again, if we're just going to keep comparing art as sports, which I'm a proponent of us stopping, but as long as we keep doing it, I might as
It
well
helps us make the
participate.
point. It helps us make the point that we need to make.
Yes, because in sports, and it really doesn't matter which sport you're talking about. I mostly follow football and hockey, but I'm sure, and I know this to be true, it's very applicable to, soccer and to baseball and, basketball as well. When you get toward the end of a season and teams realize that they don't really have a shot at making the playoffs, they tank.
Yeah.
They simply do not. Well, the players always play hard, and as we'll talk about, I don't think the players are lacking in effort with this film.
But the program fails them.
Yes, it's all about management. It's the general management that makes decisions that make the team less competitive, and therefore, toward the end of the season, they tend to lose a lot. And I think that's what's happening here with Is This Thing On? I think Searchlight realizes that in this year, we probably aren't going to make the playoffs. We're not going to win a championship. We don't have a shot. So we're going to make managerial decisions that leaves our chances of getting there a lot lessened. I think that's exactly what's happening here.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think they just simply realized, the year being what it is, this was going to be a money waster for them in some ways, for Searchlight specifically, to try to campaign hard for this one.
Yeah.
And for reasons we'll get into, might be a little bit unfortunate.
Well,
simply say.
I was going to say, like, if I'm continuing that analogy a little bit further, and again, I'm sorry to alienate probably, a significant chunk of our audience just by bringing up sports altogether, but to make it all the more alienated, I'm going to invoke hockey, specifically the NHL, here for a second as well, because I think with Is This Thing On, it's quite analogous to Mighty Detroit Red Wings of the last few years, who were teams that were on the fringe of making the playoffs. And in fact, last year, they had a really great shot at making the playoffs. Now, the team toward the end of the year did not perform as great as they should have. However, managerially, they didn't really do much to help the team. The GM didn't make a whole lot of trades. They didn't really do anything in the offseason to help them get over the hump, so to speak. And it's frustrating because I felt like they were good enough to make the playoffs. Like,
Sure.
The core is there. They just needed a few more pieces, which they probably should have done at the trade deadline to get them across the finish line and into the playoffs. That's kind of how I feel about Is This Thing On, in the sense that I do feel like there are elements to this film that are more than good enough. Like this is a movie that can be competitive, or at least get to the playoffs, aka get nominations, even if it's not going to win. I think it's certainly good enough that it could do that, but managerially, they're just not doing enough. They're not helping the team, so to speak.
This definitely seems like one of those years where Searchlight seemingly took a break, I guess, because if you look at the other films that they either distributed or co-produced this year, it's not many. It's not like how it was last year, where they put a lot of their eggs into baskets such as A Complete Unknown or A Real Pain. Now, I know a movie like A Real Pain was distribution only, but I think that conversation still matters. And they've done the same thing in previous years. Like in 2023, they were very much involved with movies like Poor Things and All of Us Strangers. In 2025, they have Is This Thing On? They also have Rental Family. And earlier this year, The Roses, which apparently no one saw.
Yeah, that just came and went. Yeah, nobody cared.
Yeah, so they don't have much this year. And it seems as though a movie like Is This Thing On is just sort of falling victim to the break that they seemingly want to take here.
Yeah. Well, I think they're putting all of their eggs, in the Ann Lee basket.
That hasn't come out yet. That's a good point.
That hasn't come out yet, and that will be a player, probably for score, for best actress, song. They have an original song that will be a contender. Maybe costuming as well, production design. I could see it having an impact. So that's probably where all that money's going.
That's fair.
Is into the Testament of Ann Lee. And I don't want to get too ahead of myself. That's a film that we'll get to here shortly. I have seen it. I understand why they're making that decision. I don't necessarily think it's a wrong decision if their budget is limited, which again is a thing. Going back to the sports thing, GMs have owners, and sometimes owners don't want to spend money. So they can't make a trade.
If you're not properly funded that year or that season.
You have to be funded. Exactly. Yeah. And this could be one of those situations where Searchlight, maybe they do see value in Is This Thing On, but they don't have the budget. Disney is limiting them from going after or like pushing both of them simultaneously.
Yeah, the
that
resources
could be the case.
just weren't there.
Yeah, and obviously we're not privy to all that, so who knows? But
can only speculate.
But maybe that is the case.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's the case, to be perfectly honest, because I do think it's a bit of a missed opportunity. But
we'll explain why.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get into all of that here shortly. Before we talk about Is This Thing On, real quick recap Bradley Cooper's last two films. remind everybody, because it's been a few years since we've talked about them here on the show, especially A Star Is Born. Where do you find yourself on those?
I guess I'm kind of hit or miss on Bradley Cooper as a director, but I will say this. In the world of actors turning directors, I do think Bradley Cooper has one of the more distinctive voices that we've seen behind the camera thus far. Because all of these movies that he has directed do have a very similar and particular visual style and a very specific creative language that he likes to employ. And we'll talk about that further and how that's also incorporated into a movie like Is This Thing On? But that is certainly felt in movies like A Star Is Born and Maestro. And he's really trying to get creative of what he can do as a director. In a movie like Maestro, for instance, which is a movie I didn't really care for that much. It really feels like a movie where he's just trying to get that Oscar. That really is the agenda of that movie. But it does show that he knows how to operate the camera, and he knows how to communicate a vision. And he's a very talented individual. And I think that's the thing that I've latched onto the most with his movies thus far is, because normally when we see an actor try to make the transition into filmmaker, we sometimes see a little bit of inconsistency as far as what that creative vision looks like. But Bradley Cooper has been pretty consistent. I feel like all of his films have a very similar language to them. And that's what makes him interesting. A Star Is Born is a movie I am admittedly due for a rewatch. I did quite like it. I remember really loving the first half and then having a few reservations about the back half. But I do think it is a very good film, primarily because the music's so good. So there's that element to it that I do like. But I do think he's good. I definitely have interest in seeing what he does further.
Yeah, I am quite fond of Bradley Cooper as a filmmaker. A Star Is Born is a movie that I was pretty high on when it first came out in 2019, I believe it was. I really liked it a lot.
2018 actually, but still close around that time frame. Yeah,
2018. I believe that is correct. I do really like it a lot. It wasn't quite in my top 10 that year, but I did quite love it. I think Bradley Cooper, the actor, was really, really great.
That was the underrated aspect of it. Yeah.
One of his best performances, hands down, and a performance that, as time goes on, I think lingers even more with me. But I also think from a direction perspective, I thought it was a hell of a directorial debut. You can really see glimpses of great filmmaking there, experimenting at times with certain elements. The editing, especially, I think is quite great. So that is a film that, as I sit on it more and more, I am liking it as time passes. I think there's
a lot of good things
quite well. Yeah, for sure. And the music, of course, is very good in that film. So I do like it, and I do prefer it to Maestro. With Maestro, there is a clear intention that it was aimed to be an awards player. But I will say this, because a lot of people do push back against the whole Oscars narrative, or they cling on to that as some sort of major thing that's weighing the film down. I don't care that he's trying to win Oscars. Go win Oscars. That's perfectly fine.
I don't mind that either.
Me.
I just wish there was more to that movie than just that particular agenda.
And that's it. And I think with Maestro, it's I think he just gets bogged down in one. He is giving everything he can into the performance and the vocal aspect of the character. And there's obviously a lot of energy being put into him challenging himself performatively.
Yeah.
And then you couple that with the directorial conviction of that film, and say what you will about Maestro, and I do think there are issues with it, but I think from a direction perspective, it's quite incredible. I do think there are really, really good.
There are very interesting sequences in that movie.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think it's a strong sophomore effort from a direction perspective. Where that film falters is with the screenplay. I think Bradley
Cooper,
Cooper,
shaggy movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's so caught up in the direction, where what am I going to do with the camera? How am I going to make this interesting? The performance, the dialect, and all of that. the screenplay clearly came in third of that trio of jobs
Maybe,
that he had.
well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it also came in fourth or fifth when you actually consider the giant balloon Snoopy that that the movie has
Yeah.
become kind of known for. I think even Bradley Cooper himself, as a director, was like, I'm more interested in that giant inflatable Snoopy
Yeah.
for the Thanksgiving parade than I am even my own screenplay.
Yeah. The
he's focused on
screenplay-
other things.
Yeah, the screenplay wasn't there. I do think that unless he's only credited because of what he's doing behind the camera and some of the choices he makes that affects the screenplay, and sometimes that happens, and that's why filmmakers end up being credited. I don't know. But if he did have a genuine hand in writing the screenplay with Josh Singer, that clearly was not the first that wasn't the main thing with Cooper with that.
It was not, no.
And I do think the writing leaves a lot to be desired as a result. So what's interesting with Is This Thing On, you can, and I don't know if the path he takes with this film is a result of Maestro and maybe being overstretched. I don't know. But
yeah, I thought about that.
He does take a very different approach to Is This Thing On as a result. And for reasons we'll talk about, maybe that was for the best. But that is to say, Maestro, I still like it overall. I don't think it's bad by any stretch of the imagination. Really great directorially. His performance, I think, is good. Maybe not great, but certainly good. It's, the writing.
Carey
just
Mulligan
lacks with
is
that
the
film.
great performance in that one.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. So that brings us to his third effort here, one that, to your point, Brennan, is not being talked about all that much, which is quite interesting. And not just right now as we're in award season, but even leading up to now, it didn't feel like people were talking about this film as, oh my God, we're all anticipating Bradley Cooper's third film.
Yeah.
Throughout the entirety of the year, nobody was really talking about this movie.
At least I didn't see
kind
it.
of quietly. It's just been quietly there, which I think is interesting.
Well, maybe it'll
I
be
don't know
one
how
of
to
those
interpret
movies
that.
maybe it'll be one of those movies that Searchlight thinks will discover or will find an audience in time. Might be one of those
Perhaps.
sleeper hits or
Yeah.
something.
Okay. With that said, let's go ahead and transition into Is This Thing On? Directed by the aforementioned Bradley Cooper. Now, he does have a hand in the screenplay here as well, alongside Will Arnett and Mark Chappell. The film stars Will Arnett, as well as Laura Dern, Andra Day, Bradley Cooper in a supporting role this time.
Yeah.
And, there's a slew of others that come and go. Like a lot of people that come and go throughout this
A
movie.
few cameos here that we may have to reveal at the end of this
Yes.
conversation.
We do. There's at least one we have to talk
There's
about.
at least one.
Just
Yeah, we
full-on
talk about it
spoilers.
offline. We have to talk
Yes.
about this one.
Yeah, we'll get to that here in a little bit. If you're not familiar with Is This Thing On? As their marriage unravels, Alex faces middle age and divorce, seeking new purpose in the New York comedy scene. Meanwhile, his wife Tess confronts sacrifices made for their family, forcing them to navigate co-parenting and identities. All right, Brendan, what did you think about Is This Thing On?
So, of Bradley Cooper's 3 directorial efforts, I think this is his best one. And honestly, I don't even think it's close. And I say that as someone that actually quite liked A Star is Born at the very least. I was mixed on Maestro, but I do understand why this one isn't being quite as marketed at the very least, because when you compare this to something like A Star is Born and Maestro, it doesn't feel like Bradley Cooper is taking as many directorial chances as he did with those films. Those films definitely had a very specific creative directorial vision where he was really trying to do some unique forms of trickery behind the camera.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, this movie, Is This Thing On, I would still argue still feels very much stylistically in keeping with those prior 2 films. And I think a lot of it really does have to do with returning cinematographer Matthew Libatique. I think the way the camera moves, the way it lingers on character interactions, the way it kind of flutters and almost feels like a handheld kind of observatory kind of thing, it definitely feels in line with those previous 2 films. It just seems as though this is Bradley Cooper operating with a bit more restraint this time. And perhaps that is him learning a few of those lessons from a movie like Maestro, where he may have bit off a bit more than he could chew, right? So he takes things a
Maybe.
step back. And in a way, this kind of feels like it should have been his debut. Like, I feel like if I were to see all of these movies, all three of these movies, I would have at least guessed that this was his first one, just given the stylistic choices that are made before he then adds a little bit more edge and oomph to his creative choices. But here, I feel like this is his best work because it's his most realized work. It's the one where I feel like everything he is doing creatively, performatively, actually feels like it's all in sync with one another. And a lot of that also maybe comes down to the screenplay here, which actually is one of the stronger screenplays I think I've seen in any movie this year. A lot of that is due to Will Arnett, and he is giving a very good performance here that, again, I think is unfortunately getting lost in the conversation. I think he is quite terrific here, giving a performance that really turns this movie into something that is one of the better midlife crisis movies that I think we've got as of late. For reasons we'll talk about, I think there's a lot of truth in the way that those themes are conveyed. I think this is a very effective movie, and I was genuinely surprised by it.
I am with you. I do think this is Bradley Cooper's best film today. Again, I'm quite high on A Star is Born, maybe a little bit more than you, but I very much do echo that sentiment that this is his best directorial effort as of 2025, which is somewhat ironic because, as you were just talking about there, it is his most simple in terms of direction. There's nothing flashy about this film, but I think that approach gives way for a complex narrative about marriage and love and divorce without ever being melodramatic or trite. The screenplay here is quite incisive and deft in that regard, all while being very funny too. It's not reinventing the wheel by any means. It's just a movie that leans into its organic rhythms and character dynamic. And Will Arnett and Laura Dern are really terrific here at playing into all of that with their performances. They have a great chemistry that on one hand makes you believe they were married at one point, but also you understand why they're no longer together.
Yeah.
And Will Arnett specifically might be one of my nominees for best surprise performance at the In Session Film Awards. Just have never seen anything like this from him before. He is really funny, as you would expect, but when he's asked to dig into those complexities in the screenplay, his loneliness and hurt is quite palpable, which gives credence to one of the film's themes here, something I talk about all the time as a favorite through line of mine, and that's art as a means of therapy. But what's fascinating about that idea here is that it's stand-up comedy, which we don't see as much of in film. And I do love how for Alex, it's something that comes on somewhat randomly. I mean, maybe it's something he had been thinking of for some time, but in the context of this film and how it comes about, it's not necessarily this desire for a career change, but primarily it's this way to talk about his midlife crisis.
He basically finds it by accident.
Yes, very much.
I mean,
by
or
accident.
to be clear, he finds it because he just simply wants to go to a bar to have a drink, but doesn't want to pay the $15 cover. That's how he discovers it.
It's very much accidental, but it does become this avenue for catharsis. And again, how Arnett threads that line of humor and genuine emotional turmoil as he's there on stage and then embracing this new identity, I think is really incredible. And especially with Cooper and how he captures it for all the reasons you talked about, I do think is quite sublime as well. So yes, you certainly will recognize a few of those familiar filmmaking things that Cooper has demonstrated in his previous two movies, but there is a lot of restraint here. It's such a very different approach, and I can understand why someone would think that this is his directorial debut if you didn't know. But again, I think with Maestro, I don't know if he bit off more than he could chew from a directorial perspective. Again, I think it just came down to I'm the director, I'm the lead actor, and I'm also writing the screenplay here. I think all three of those together absolutely bit off a bit more than he could chew, and the screenplay suffered as a result. I still maintain the direction of that film is quite inspired and intuitive. And I think what's interesting here is it's almost the inverse. It doesn't have the flashy filmmaking, but the screenplay is rich. It is robust and meticulous, and that comes through quite well here.
There's still a lot of things between all three of these movies that I think are similar to each other with regard to Bradley Cooper's direction, because he does like to utilize a lot of long takes, especially during moments of performance specifically. And I think of a movie like Maestro. There's that great long take of him as Leonard Bernstein doing that great conducting exercise that lasts about 6 or 7 minutes. It basically feels like an action scene. And then there are a few other sequences in Maestro, such as maybe in the opening 10 minutes where the camera literally just swings back and forth at this assembly hall, I think it was. There's a lot about that movie where it almost feels like Bradley Cooper, the director, is saying, look what I can do, which is sometimes fun to see, right? That shows a director feeling very confident in what they're able to do. The difference here with Is This Thing On is that he's doing those things very subtly, but it's more at the service of the performance or the character or the screenplay. It's all working in parallel with each other, which is why you might not notice those tricks as much. But I think they are there, just more subtly done. Because I think of some of those moments of Will Arnett as Alex doing some of these moments of stand-up. The camera still kind of lingers when what feels like a long take. There's actually a really great gag when he's making a joke about a surfer's forearms, and he tries to compare it to his own forearms, and the camera just slowly drops to show his forearm before it moves back. Like that's a moment where I thought, okay, I am very much reminded of some of the things that Cooper did as a director in movies like A Star Is Born and Maestro, just done in a different way. And I think that's why this is my favorite of his efforts thus far, because it feels like it's at the service of everything else as opposed to being at the service of what he can do as a director, which is very interesting to see sometimes. But I love how it all works together in this way. It feels like everything is calculated and everything's talking to each other.
Yeah, I had no issue with some of that flashiness, for the lack of a better term, in Maestro, especially
and
given
to be clear,
what,
Yeah, to be clear, I don't either. It's just a very different agenda when compared to this.
For sure. And I think it is in service of that material, given what, like who that film was tackling and what he was known for. I think to come at it with a little bit of bombacity makes a lot of sense. Bringing that to this film certainly wouldn't have made as much sense, for sure. So I do love that it is much more restrained, again, in service of the screenplay and the characters, as we've been talking about. And I'm perfectly fine with that subtlety here. The camera doesn't really need to call attention to itself. The only time it really does is when he's on stage.
Yeah.
Which, again, makes sense because it's the moment when Alex it's all about him. He's on stage, people are there to listen to him, and because this film is ciphering art as a means of therapy, we need to see how he's reacting on stage when he's getting laughs, not getting laughs, sometimes making it up as he goes, especially early on. And having those extreme close-ups in that moment, or the handheld element of it, which can be quite shaky at times to echo his vulnerability there on the stage, that certainly makes sense there. When he's off stage, there isn't much to the camera work that calls attention to itself, which I do really love, because the strengths of this film are the screenplay and, again, those performances, Will Arnett as Alex and Laura Dern as Tess, and the volatility that we see between them, and where this film ultimately goes in examining their marriage, the divorce that we see early on in the film, and then how those two manage that in a very antithetical way to something like Marriage Story that I find really interesting. I think it says something about relationships and how it can look on the other side of a fractured relationship, because oftentimes it is broken and there is no repair to be had, even when kids are involved. But I do love how this film goes about navigating those nuances of, well, we can't really be together, but can we be together? Can we get back together? You know, it when you put it into those terms, it almost feels a little high schooly. But when you get to your midlife, I think it's interesting how those same dynamics can still very much be at play, but in a very different, more mature way that this film fully embraces. And I do love how it goes about tackling that volatility in that relationship here.
It's very rare for any movie or television show, whatever that medium might be, to give us two characters who are either separated or at least close to a divorce, yet are still trying to find ways to co-parent and get along with each other for the benefit of their kids. I feel like that's kind of a rarity. A lot of times when those dynamics are spelled out for us in a movie, for instance, it's usually there for conflict and for drama. And there is a little bit of that here, but it's the kind of drama that's needed for this particular type of story. And I do appreciate that this movie is sidestepping traditional conflict to introduce new forms of conflict given their specific relationship. Actually, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, after this separation has been baked into the narrative, this happens maybe about a third of the way through, all four of them are hanging out at Alex's apartment checking their kids for lice. And then both Tess and Alex do that for each other, and it becomes kind of this almost strange, intimate, almost flirtatious moment between them. And I love the complexities of that. I really do.
I do as well. And maybe part of it is like experience. Like I was reminded of my like early 30s where there was an element of this. Now, where my life ended up going was like the ending to that story was very different than what we see here.
Sure.
But it's that idea that in the aftermath of a broken relationship, there's still hope to be found or something cordial to be found there.
Sure.
I do love how this film navigates that in a way that at times makes you feel like you can see where things are going to go before ultimately there are these bumpy spots. And I think that those bumpy moments here, they're not born out of a screenplay needing plot mechanics to drive melodrama. Again, I don't think this film has any ounce of melodrama here, but rather it's born out of character. For example, I think of that moment when Alex, he gets this photo of Tess, and it's this giant photo of her when she's in her prime. She's on the U.S. volleyball team, the national U.S. Olympic volleyball team. And it's this huge frame, this huge poster, and he gets it as a gift to her, thinking that it's something that she would like, but ultimately he misses the point. And I don't want to necessarily reveal the details of the conversation for spoiler reasons, but it is fascinating to hear Tess recoil to it and how it, how it creates a bit of conflict there. But the film had built to that through, again, exposing why these two were getting a divorce in the first place, and what Alex's perspective was and all of that, how Tess feels about being in this relationship or what her experiences were in this marriage. I know I'm speaking in broad terms there, but once Bradley Cooper highlights what those two perspectives are, and this moment with the poster ultimately crystallizes at the end of the film, Tess recoils at it, not again for service of plot and conflict, but more so like the film had earned that reaction. And that's the brilliance of the screenplay here. It's not reinventing the wheel. A lot of what we see here, you've seen in a million other films before, but there's something about those organic rhythms and how it all comes back to character and addressing something that is universal in
Yeah.
terms of relationships and that male female dynamic that I think is really well earned because
Well,
of how
yeah.
Cooper goes about examining those things.
Well, it's done with sincerity. I think that's
Yeah.
really the big thing
It's
there. And
earnest, yeah.
when I called this a midlife crisis movie, it's mostly funneled through the Alex character because he is our main
Yeah,
character,
he
played by
is the
Will
lead
Arnett.
here, yes. Yeah.
But the same could be said for Tess. There is a midlife crisis there as well, and that's why she reacts to this poster that you're talking about in a very particular
That's
way.
also very true, yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
really, if anything, the movies, or at least Bradley Cooper's intent with highlighting their different perspectives and how they react to a situation like that, if anything, it's this look at what it means to be happy versus unhappy in a marriage and how you have to find happiness within the unhappiness. That sometimes happiness is about learning to be unhappy with your partner while simultaneously understanding that sometimes you kind of need those individual things outside of your marriage for your own life that then fuels the happiness that you can then bring home to your families.
Yeah.
To put it as broadly as possible, everyone sometimes needs a hobby, right? That's outside the realm of just their relationship. And that's sometimes how they're able to fuel each other's needs in that way. It becomes a very indirect and psychological addition to how a marriage works in many ways. And I think that's what this movie's also looking at.
Yeah, and I think it says a lot about healing, right? Because both Alex and Tess are experiencing some sort of inner turmoil that they could never remedy by being together. Again, something I very much can relate with going back to my early 30s. I had to do a lot of inner searching before I could find myself at a place to date again.
Yeah.
And if I didn't do that work, I don't think I would be married to Brandy today and have the life that I have today.
You had to learn to love yourself first.
I had to do a lot of work internally to find some sort of peace, especially as it relates to another relationship, which is what we see here with Alex and Tess.
Yeah.
Again, without getting into spoilers as to where this ends, my story ended up veering in a different direction and I found someone else, but I had to do that work. I had to do that work. Now, my coping mechanism wasn't stand-up comedy. I was never going to do that. But it became something else entirely, to your point, finding something that can help foster that healing. So when you do go through that and you kind of can find yourself on the other side, that's when relationships can blossom. And that's very much what happens here, is that these two characters separately, they can never do it together, but separately, they're able to do that work. So when we get to those final scenes, it makes sense as to why those two characters are able to engage, I'll say vaguely.
Their arcs are able to conclude the way that they do, we'll simply say.
Yes.
It makes sense for where they end up.
Yeah. So I do think it's like this film, while it's about many different things, I do think there is something to this film about the power of healing and the idea of having to do that separately. Even if you're married, you know, sometimes you have to step outside of that and find something that will foster that healing. And then once you go through that, then you can come back to that relationship or you can move on to a different one, whatever the case may be. But that idea here and how Bradley Cooper examines it, I think it's handled with a lot of diligence. There is great complexity to it that I loved.
And I think that's another reason why I feel like this is still in keeping with Bradley Cooper's other directorial efforts, because this is still, once again, a movie about healing through some form of performance art. That really is what this is. And you could say the same thing in many ways about movies like Maestro or A Star is Born. Really, the big difference with those movies is that it was more interested in, I guess, the stardom, if you will, of that specific form of performance
Yeah.
art in both those movies. And of course, those movies were also more music based than this one
Yeah.
is. And in many ways, Is This Thing On is doing something similar, but it's tackling it in a way that makes it feel like the inverse. When compared to
Yeah.
those movies, it's more interested in what goes on behind those scenes. And ironically, as we mentioned, Alex is doing some form of performance art, stand-up comedy, but he's not going at it with dreams of being a stand-up comic. I mean, he's doing this
Yeah.
because he needs to. that's why
Exactly.
he's and I found that really
Yeah.
intriguing. He's more interested in spending time talking to his fellow stand-up comedians after he's already done his set, just hanging out
Yeah.
upstairs at the bar, and that's
Mhm.
just as important to him. And I
Yeah.
love that this movie is kind of doing what
Yeah.
Bradley Cooper has done before, but sort of, if those movies are heads, this is tails. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of what this is doing.
No, I completely agree. I mean, yeah, I love that thematic through line in a lot of films. We've talked about that even this year to a degree. Hamnet
Mhm.
would make for an interesting double feature here, even if the grief,
Kind of
so to
kind of
speak, is
would,
very
yeah.
different. But thematically, there are a lot of parallels for sure.
Mhm.
And I do love how this film handles that. And I agree with you, Alex, as he does the stand up. And again, going back to how the camera helps amplify him, essentially going through therapy when he's on stage. It's something
Mhm.
he needs, which is why he needs those moments with other stand up comics, or there's
Yeah.
a couple of moments where we just see him at home writing jokes and really putting in the work because yes, there is an innate talent there that he comes to find, which is
Yeah.
another through line here that is interesting in and all of itself. But it's less about the talent and fostering that talent. That's certainly part of it, but really it's
Mhm.
I need to do this. I
Yeah.
need this for my own healing, and he's fully committed to it. And I
Yeah.
think what's interesting inside of that here, I kept waiting for the shoe to drop because you always expect that at some point there's going to be the inevitable disaster show,
Mhm.
which with stand up comedy, especially more so than maybe any of those other art forms, perhaps music, you could have a cold response from the audience for sure.
Yeah. Or
But
in a
with
movie like A Star Is Born, you actually take a piss on stage.
you piss yourself when you're super drunk.
Yeah.
But with stand up comedy, what's interesting is that you almost come to expect it. Like bombing on stage is a huge part of the growing
Mhm.
process for comics. So you're waiting for that shoe to drop here. I think what's interesting about Cooper and Arnett and Chappell and what they do here is that they mostly avoid that. There is one moment near the end of the film, and I wouldn't even say that he completely bombs, at least given some of the sound design and the crowd shots that Cooper does show us, but it's less about the crowd reaction and more so about Arnett stumbling because of him. He's being lost in the moment because of the scene before where
Yeah. There was a
he
particular interaction that affected his performance in the next
affected his
scene. Yeah.
performance. And I think what's interesting about the duality of it is that throughout the entirety of the film, his father, really his mother and his father, they were like, "Why are you doing this, Alex? This is
Yeah.
nonsense."
Well, yeah.
But this is the one moment where his father goes, he wants to check it out, and they have such a fascinating conversation afterward that again is less about the success of the performance or the lack thereof. There's certainly some levity to it. They laugh about it, but the moment is again more about the character dynamics at play and ultimately how that helps Alex in this healing process. So even though he bombs on stage ish, for him, he bombs.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Even though, again, from a crowd reaction perspective, you could say it was so-so. It wasn't like a full-on bomb, but for him, it was. And yet, it's still this vital moment in terms of art as a means of therapy for him. And without it, I don't know if we get those last moments at the end of the film.
No, yeah, and what I love about that sequence too, while that does become the quote unquote shoe dropping moment of the movie, Cooper, Arnett, and Chappell do a really tricky thing as far as how they navigate this story from a screenwriting standpoint by sort of setting you up to think that that shoe dropping moment's going to come earlier, and then it doesn't. And the moment I'm talking about is when he being Alex, gives a 10-minute set where he's actually one of the acts for a particular night as opposed to just an open mic night. And there's someone in the audience, someone very important in the audience.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the moment where I thought, okay, please conclude this right. Please handle this very gracefully. I don't want this to be the generic shoe dropping conflict moment. And the way it concludes, which I will not spoil, I had to pause the movie because it made me laugh so hard, and I loved where it went. So then by that point, when the shoe does drop in a later scene, you're not ready for it. So it's like I love the tricky way that it navigates that story thread.
That's a really great point. That moment when he's and it's an important New York comedy scene venue. We can note that for sure. It's a name that people will recognize when you see the name of the place on the wall. You're like, oh, okay, I know exactly where we're at here.
Yeah.
So it is this big moment for Alex.
Yeah.
In his newly founded career, he gets this big moment. And yes, given who's in the crowd, you're like, oh boy, here we go. Here we go. But it's actually handled with some great diligence. And it doesn't go the way that you expect it to. And I do love that from Cooper, because I was fully anticipating chaos there. And there was a little bit of chaos, but again, in this subversive way that I just did not anticipate. And in fact, if there's any conflict there, it really is with another character that maybe we can get to in spoilers as far as how it impacts this character's trajectory. Well, and the conversation that's being taken place with said cameo.
Sure.
I think is really important. There's a lot there. So it is this revealing moment, but from Alex's perspective, it actually goes very smoothly. It goes quite well, and it's very funny. And Arnett does such a great job with it. So, I love that in the writing as well.
It's really navigating some tricky ground. I don't even want to say what that line is that this individual who was in the crowd says, but it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I thought it really was quite great.
Unless you want to get into spoilers here.
Well, let's go ahead, because we are going to spoil a particular cameo. So we might as well just get into the specifics of this particular scene, because I love it so much. I just want to verbalize it. So I guess, spoilers from here on out.
And also, we can then also talk about the ending of the film, because I would like to do that in some detail as well. But yes, going back to this specific moment, spoilers for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah. So the individual in the crowd is Tess, and she's not on a date with a particular individual. She's actually attending a business meeting with another coach. So Tess used to play for the Olympic volleyball team and now wants to get into coaching. And of course, the individual that she's meeting is a man by the name of Laird. That's the character name, but he is played by Peyton Manning.
That Peyton Manning.
But in the moment, it does kind of become like a moment of flirtatiousness between the two of them when they both kind of realize that each of their partners are no longer in the picture for their respective lives. So they decide, okay, after this meeting, let's go to this. He goes, let's go to this place downtown. It's a great spot, and we're gonna have some fun. Turns out it's the comedy club that Alex is about to perform at. And of course, you as an audience member, knowing that Tess is in the audience, you think one of two things is going to happen. Either one, Alex is going to see her in the crowd and bomb his set. Or two, she's going to get really pissed off and it's going to lead to a conflict between them. You think one of those two things is going to happen. And I feel like Cooper as a director knows that that's going to be one of your reactions. Instead, Tess is turned on by it. And they have this confrontation in the streets, and she says, that was actually kind of hot. And then
it's fascinasching. And again, since we're talking details here, it's worth noting that it's not any Joe Schmo comedy club. It's the New York Comedy Cellar.
It is.
So
That's
it
correct.
is a premium spot. and he was eager to get there. In fact, I think Alex was supposed to have the kids, had
yeah.
to pawn them off to grandma and grandpa,
Yeah,
which
maybe not a
any
good
parent is familiar with. And so then he goes down to perform this set at the Comedy Cellar where Tess is in the audience as you're talking about. And that initial reaction when she's confused as to what's going on, that's when you're at your most, okay, here we go. This is when the shoe's going to drop. But her reaction is quite fascinating. And it's funny to see Peyton Manning as layered his reaction as well, because he is wholly flustered because he also knows what's going on here.
Yeah.
So he's like, do we leave? Should we go? And she sticks it out. And you're right, that moment on the street in the aftermath of it, it completely changes the trajectory of the movie. And again, it's just one of those interesting things when you see Alex performing. Again, some of it has to do with his career, but a lot of this is art as therapy.
Yeah.
And then to see Tess react to that, see a side of Alex that she had never seen before, didn't know that existed, and where the film goes from there, how that relationship evolves, and ultimately what we see in those final scenes, you just don't get there without her seeing that side of him.
Yeah.
And letting this art form become this tool of therapy. It is quite fascinating, invigorating to see.
And you're right that it does change the trajectory of where the movie's going. It then becomes a movie about a man essentially dating his ex-wife, which is a weird way of saying that. But the way that they then have to navigate this tricky water of, okay, what do we tell people? Are we still keeping this a secret? Does this even mean we're together again because we can't tell people about it yet? So it becomes really tricky, and then leads to this vacation spot they go on with their friends, Oyster Bay, I believe it is. And while they're all hanging out, they still have to try and find ways to, sleep together without telling anybody. It does make for some moments of pretty good comedy.
One of my favorite moments is near the end. And there's this moment where Alex and Tess, they kind of sneak off to this other part of the house. And it's flirtatious because we, as the audience, know what's going on. And to your point, they are having to, or not having to, but they are hiding it pretty much from everyone around them until they find the right moment to tell people that they are dating once again.
Yeah.
And so Christine finds them in this hallway. And from her perspective, knowing that they have divorced, she just assumes that they are arguing. And so she just goes all in on Alex. As far as like, I told you not to come over here and cause drama and all this chaos. And he just has to sit there and eat it. Like he just has to take it on the chin. It's really funny. Yeah.
There are some great moments in that stretch of film when they're at Oyster Bay together. I will say, if I do have one criticism of the movie, I do think some of those sequences do go on a little bit too long. There is maybe a little bit of tediousness at some of those Oyster Bay sequences. I mean, there's a stretch where they all just sing Amazing Grace for no reason. It sounds pretty cool, but I'm just starting to thinking like, okay, like is this just because Bradley Cooper has made 2 movies already that are about music in some ways, and we need some music performance somewhere in this movie that's not even about music performance? So like
that's fair.
Yeah, so there is some fat around some of those sequences that I think you could have trimmed, but at the same time, I do love some of these interactions, like the one you talked about, or when Christine finally confronts Alex and says, "Why I despise you so much." I think that's
a
also
great
pretty
moment
effective
in this film
scene.
too.
And Andre Day is effective in that scene as well.
I agree. In another dynamic we haven't really talked about is that Christine is married to Bradley Cooper, whose name, by the way, in this film is Balls. That's what he goes by, Balls.
I feel like Bradley Cooper is playing a character that would have seen like At Home and maybe A Star Is Born or something like that, because he kind of represents the more traditional form of performance, the more stardom side of it. But his name is Balls. He gets high all the time. There's a scene at a birthday party where he walks in holding one of Alex and Tess's dogs,
Yeah.
and he just simply says, "I didn't know I was holding the dog. I had no idea I was holding the dog."
Yeah. It's very funny. Bradley
Yeah.
Cooper is hysterical in this film, by the way. And again,
Yeah.
going back to I might have overworked myself with Maestro. He's obviously directing this. He has a hand in the writing, but he plays a small supporting role here, and he's just having the time of his life. It is very, very
yeah.
funny.
I wonder if his performance here is sort of a meta commentary on his overstuffed direction for a movie like Maestro, because his entrance in this movie is him tripping and spilling milk. Like I wonder if he's trying to say something about that. Be like, listen,
Yeah.
I know I bit off maybe a little bit more than I can chew. I tried my best, but I'm toning it back a little
Yeah.
bit here. So
And Balls is a struggling actor. That's his thing. In fact, when Alex tells him that he's doing stand up, he's supportive but a little jealous because he's like, that's supposed to be my thing. Like the whole art thing is supposed to be my thing.
Yeah.
And then as the film goes and we find out that Alex and Tess are dating, it kind of invokes something interesting between Christine and Balls, again, who are also married and have their own challenges. And I do love how, again, that relationship, what Christine and Balls see in those two, it kind of motivates them to essentially go on a similar journey by the end of the film and work things out between them. So like the trickle effect of Alex using art as a coping mechanism, it goes beyond just himself. It goes beyond his relationship with Tess even. So I do like, I love how Bradley Cooper shows the power of that tangibly in this film. I think it's compelling.
Yeah, I agree, and I like the way it concludes for them, and I especially like the way it concludes for both Alex and Tess, which I know we haven't specifically said yet. Maybe this is a great transition to the ending of the movie and what happens to them. They get back together. It works out for them. And what I actually like about this movie is that it's very clear. It's not trying to be ambiguous as to will they, won't they. I think the movie is very much suggesting that they are going to be okay in the end. That this is going to work out for them. And I actually like how brazen and on point and on the nose that is, because the movie does the work earning that point and getting to that point to make you believe that, okay, this is what they needed to do separately before they can come back together. And I love that. I love that
agree.
It's not going for any type of like, oh, maybe things won't work. I like the lack of ambiguity here.
I agree. It's not ambiguous, and I'm glad that it's not ambiguous. I think it would have been a disservice to the film thematically if it ended in this, maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. And like, I love ambiguity. A lot of the time it's probably the right call, but sometimes you need to be a little bit more brazen. And I do think this is one of those times, because the whole film is about the power of art as a coping mechanism and doing that work, and for them to do that separately, but then end in this way of, well, maybe it won't work out. Who knows? I just think it does a disservice to what that idea is, how it's trying to be conveyed here.
It invalidates that whole thing of us, to say it again very bluntly and simplistically, us having our own individual hobbies that then become an indirect effect of our marriages. Like, I can speak from personal experience. Me being a musician on the side, me being a podcaster on the side, does weirdly make my marriage better, because it makes me better, and I'm able to bring that betterness to my marriage then.
Exactly.
And that's in a way, that's what this movie's about.
Absolutely. If the film had been about challenging that idea, that'd be one thing.
That'd be different.
Then you need an ambiguous ending, but this film was not doing that at all. Like, it's giving credence to that idea, bringing hope to that idea, that if you do that work, then on the other side of it, you will see your life improve tenfold. So to end in a way that is not ambiguous, I think was absolutely the right call. And again, the way it's handled in execution, it's not melodramatic, it's not sappy or sentimental. It's certainly hopeful, for sure. It's warm, but it's done in a way that I think echoes those complexities and nuances that we had seen throughout the entire film. Because even like test, the way that she reacts to it, like Laura Dern is really great in the moment because she's like, am I really going to do this? Are we really doing this? I guess we're doing this.
Yeah. It's very aware of itself, which I do appreciate. And I do think the ending's very tender and great needle drop from Queen and David Bowie, Under Pressure, which is a pretty obvious needle drop and one that's probably a bit tired at this point because it's
I
used
wish
in so
they
many
would stop
movies.
using it in the trailers.
I know. But I mean, I feel like a lot of trailers are doing that. Unfortunately, they're utilizing a certain needle drop that has a huge impact on the movie itself because it kind of helps sell the overall point of the movie. There's another movie from this year that's doing the same thing. I don't know if you've seen the most recent trailer for Marty Supreme, but
No.
it does use the song that plays at the end of that movie. And it's
That's
kind of unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's utilized well here. I mean, again, Under Pressure is probably one of those songs that might need to be penalty boxed for a little while. But I think it's used effectively here because it's their kids performing it in this like school band kind of thing, which is actually kind of adorable.
It's great. I know the final scene is fantastic. Yeah, it's a good way to end this film for sure. Do you have any other final thoughts on this?
We didn't really talk much about Alex's parents in this movie. Christine Ebersole plays his mother Marilyn, and Kieran Hines plays his dad. Both really good as well. And there are a few other cameos of a sort, especially when it comes to the comedy scenes, because we do have some real life stand-up comedians working alongside this material, such as Chloe Radcliffe or Jordan Jensen, Reggie Conquest. So a lot of them are playing, I guess, variations of themselves. So the film is trying to partake in a certain world and actually add some realism to it, which I think it's very good at doing.
Yeah, and those comedy club scenes are great. Like there's certainly an authenticity to them for sure. And again, I just love how it immerses us into that world with Alex and why he's so engulfed in it. It's fantastic. No, I agree. Yeah, I love all of that as well. Again, I just cannot say enough good things about this screenplay. I do think it's really good. It's quite easily my favorite screenplay of the two. I still maintain that I think my favorite direction is probably A Star Is Born, but I think overall Is This Thing On is the best of the three, and
it's the most well-rounded movie of the three.
It is the most well-rounded. I do love that Cooper is willing to submit himself to the direction fully, ironically, given the restraint here, and is willing to get out of the way performatively. And again, his performance here is great. It is a supporting performance, but he's as entertaining as ever in this movie. As balls. Just like it. I can't take
best
that
name of all
seriously,
time.
but that's the point, I guess. Do love that though. And Will Arnett,
he's terrific in this.
He
like
is
you call
really, really good. Really good.
You called it one of the best surprise performances of the year, but it's also a name I'm going to be thinking about when it comes to best actor as well. I actually think he is at least deserving of being in the conversation.
No, I agree. I don't know if he's going to crack my 5 personally. We'll see. We're about a month out, a little less than a month out from the In Session Film Awards. At this point, he's not in my 5, but I do agree with you. It's at least worthy of being in the conversation. At the very least, definitely going to crack the lineup for Best Surprise Actor, because you just don't. Like some of the depths we see with Alex, we've never really seen that from Will before. The comedy, obviously, we know he's great at that. Love Will Arnett as a comedian, but he goes to some territory here that is quite subversive for his reputation. But he's a talented guy. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised, but we just haven't seen it before, and it was really refreshing to see him really, bring some great authenticity to him wrestling with being this guy on the outs and needing stand-up comedy as a survival tool. And I think he has great chemistry with Laura Dern too. Like they just work really well together.
This is just a great romance film as well, if you want to look at it that way too.
It really is. Like in this mature mid-40s way. It is great. I mean, you talked about some of those great moments where they are having a conversation. There is a dialogue, but it's a little bit tender, a little funny, and it's just them interacting with each other in this, like, again, like dating flirtatious way, like they've never been together before. Like there is kind of this newfounded love, like when you date someone for the first time and you have those butterflies. It's interesting to see how Alex and Tess find that again, even though they've been together forever at this point.
I just realized this would make a great companion with a movie like This Is 40, the Judd Apatow film.
Sure,
That was
yeah.
essentially a sequel to Knocked Up, but focused on Leslie Mann and Paul Rudd as they turn 40 and navigating that midlife lost love, refining that love, and trying to balance that with their respective lives and passions.
Yeah.
In a way, this movie's kind of similar, just in a more nuanced and artful way. But
Yeah.
I guess we're getting at that age where I'm starting to relate to these themes a little bit more,
Yeah.
which is a scary
No, I
thought
agree.
to say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, especially because they have two little boys. I have two little boys. There's a lot to this film that I very much did relate with, and it's partially why I was moved by it and really loved it a lot. So, again, like, I mean, the film is being overlooked in a lot of ways. I don't think that it should. I don't know if it'll crack my top 10, but it's very much in that conversation for my top 20. And just generally, I think there's a lot to love here as far as year-end stuff goes.
Yeah,
It's good.
Yeah,
Very good.
I think there's a lot of good stuff here that's sadly being overlooked, as you said.
I agree. All right. With that said, if you agree or disagree with anything you had to say here, you can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com. This week is going to be really, really fun. So we just had this review. We have another review of The Secret Agent coming out as well. Cannot wait to talk about that one. And then on the main show this weekend, this week, I should say, it's episode 666. So it should be all about the devil.
Well, it's I guess ironically, JD, I know we're gonna be talking about The Secret Agent this week at the movie theater where that movie takes place. Guess what movie the audience is watching? The Omen. So
there you go.
I guess it
that's
makes
true.
sense that
was
we are
interesting.
having episode 666 sometime in the same week.
Yeah. Maybe we should focus our conversation on Paramount and Netflix and Warner Brothers. Speaking of the devil, maybe that's what we'll have to talk
that is
about.
the true 666 right there.
So that will have to be a part of the conversation because that is absolutely the Hollywood devil at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot to say on the matter. So we'll get to that on the main show this week. Of course, new Chasing the Gold later this week as well. New Women in Session. Please be on the lookout for all of that. With that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Oh, Will on that.
Check.
So good.
Is this thing on?